Coming up today, France intensifies its airstrikes against the self-proclaimed Islamic State group. The first sorties from a French aircraft carrier hit ISIS targets in Iraq. The US State Department issues a worldwide travel alert to US citizens in the wake of recent terror attacks in Egypt, France and Mali. Plus, thousands of people from all walks of life come to offer their condolences following the death of former President Kim Jong-sam. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Tuesday, the 24th of November. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. And we start with the latest on the renewed fight against international terrorism in the wake of the attacks in Paris. France has begun launching missions against the Islamic State group from its aircraft carrier in the Mediterranean Sea. The latest airstrikes come as the French president attempts to drum up more international support for his country's war against the extremist group. Son Jung-in starts us off.
The chief of France's armed forces says the nation launched airstrikes on Monday against Islamic State targets in the Iraqi cities of Ramadi and Mosul. The French military also carried out several bombing missions over Syria shortly after the strikes. These are the first airstrikes since France increased its military capacity by deploying the Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier into position in the eastern Mediterranean. France plans more strikes on the terror group's command and recruitment centers and oil facilities following President François Hollande's vow to intensify its campaign against the group responsible for the deadly attacks in Paris.
We will intensify our strikes and choose targets that inflict the maximum possible damage on this terrorist army.
Hollande was speaking alongside British Prime Minister David Cameron, who offered his support, including the use of a British airbase in Cyprus. They also agreed to step up cooperation in sharing intelligence and airline records. France is coordinating with Moscow via the U.S. coalition to avoid crossing paths with Russian jets that have increased attacks in Syria. Moscow's defense ministry said its warplanes had hit more than 470 targets in Syria over the past 2 days, including tanker trucks and oil infrastructure in territory occupied by ISIS. Hollande plans to seek more international support when he meets with his counterparts in Washington and Moscow this week. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Now, the Belgian capital of Brussels will remain on maximum security alert for a third straight day on Tuesday. Belgium's Prime Minister Charles Michel confirmed on Monday that schools and the city's metro system will remain shut until Wednesday. The extension comes as Belgian prosecutors charged a fourth individual with terrorism offences related to the attacks in Paris. The unnamed man was one of 16 people arrested in raids across Brussels on Sunday. The rest were released on Monday without charge. The chief target of the police raids, however, Saleh Abdeslam, a participant in the Paris terrorist attacks, is still on the run. The US State Department has issued a worldwide travel alert for its citizens in response to the increased terror threat. The alert posted on Monday says current information suggests ISIS and other Islamist terror groups are planning attacks in multiple regions. It also warns Americans to exercise caution when in public places or using public transportation and to avoid large crowds or crowded places. Despite the warning, a US official has told the BBC that there's no reason to believe US citizens would be specifically targeted. The State Department says the alert will remain in place until February 24th. Now, back here in Korea, several thousand people, including a number of high-profile political and business figures, have been visiting a hospital in Seoul to pay their respects following the death of former President Kim Jong-sam. President Park Geun-hye offered her own condolences on Monday to the bereaved family members. A state funeral will be held for Kim on Thursday. Shin Se-min reports.
Mourners have flocked to Seoul National University Hospital, sometimes waiting in long lines to lay a flower, light incense, and pay final tribute to late former President Kim Il-sung. Dressed in black, President Park Geun-hye stopped by to pay tribute to Kim and offer condolences to his bereaved family. That was just a couple of hours after she returned from a three-nation diplomacy trip early Monday morning. High-profile figures in political and business circles also continue to pay their respects.
He made a huge mark in Korea's democratization. It strikes me that he was a great mountain, just like he was sometimes called.
Lee Hee-ho, the widow of former late President Kim Dae-jung, also came to pay her condolences. U.S. Ambassador to Korea Mark Lippert and business figures, including LG Chairman Koo Bon-moo and Samsung Electronics Vice Chair Lee Jae-yong, also paid their respects. Nationwide, thousands of citizens visited altars, including a main one at the National Assembly. For the bereaved family of the late Kim, it was an especially emotional day. Earlier, a casketing service was held with some 40 family members present. Following that, specific plans for the funeral was made. Now, Kim will be the first former president to be given a public funeral ceremony since the State Funeral Act was revised last November. Unlike others, this state funeral will last for 5 days, and everything from selecting the funeral parlor to supervising the burial ceremonies will be organized by the National State Funeral Committee, headed by the Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-ahn. When all is over, Kim will be laid to rest at Seoul National Cemetery in the Dongjakgu district. 신세민, Arirang News.
Now, the chief nuclear envoys of South Korea and China will hold talks on the North Korean nuclear issue later this afternoon. Officials say Seoul's special representative for Korean Peninsula Affairs, Hwang Jung-guk, will meet with his Chinese counterpart Woo Da-wei in Beijing to follow up on North Korea-China relations and to evaluate the current political situation in North Korea. This will be the first meeting between the two since Ryu Win-san, the fifth highest official in China's Communist Party, met with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Pyongyang last month. The envoys will likely discuss ways to bring North Korea back to the long-stalled six-party denuclearization talks that also involve the United States, Japan and Russia. North Korea has condemned South Korea for its live-fire artillery drill on the western sea border, calling it, quote, the most vicious military provocation. The North's National Defense Commission warned the drills could have an adverse impact on inter-Korean ties, pointing to an upcoming round of inter-Korean talks. Now, a working-level meeting is scheduled for Thursday, and it's going to be the first encounter between the two Koreas since a landmark deal was reached in August to ease tensions between the North and the South. South Korea conducted the drills on Monday to mark the 5th anniversary of the North's shelling of Yeonpyeong Island, which left 4 people dead, including 2 civilians. Korea's shipbuilding giants have found themselves in choppy waters in recent months, posting eye-watering losses on the back of delayed constructions and cancelled orders. In an attempt to steady their respective ships, the so-called Big Three are engaging in aggressive cost-cutting measures. Kim Min-ji reports.
There will be no massive restructuring. The nation's Big Three shipbuilders say they will try to maintain their labor pool as much as possible and instead cut jobs and salaries at the boardroom level. According to industry sources, Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering, Hyundai Heavy Industries and Samsung Heavy Industries are tightening their belts, but non-executive employees shouldn't be affected. Among other steps, Daewoo Shipbuilding plans to sell non-core assets and cut down on material costs in return for $3.6 billion from its creditors. The company has also laid off 30% of its executives and cut the remaining executive salaries by between 10 to 20%. It has also accepted voluntary retirement for 300 executives. Hyundai Heavy Industries is also cutting costs across all subsidiaries for the first time. The presidential board are not taking salaries, while executives have seen their wages cut by up to 50% and 10% for directors in its shipbuilding-related arms. It has suspended unnecessary training and event programs until it turns a profit, and it will also reduce the number of new hires. The same goes for Samsung Heavy Industries. It has cut executives by 30% and says the company will accept voluntary resignations but carry on with new hiring plans as scheduled. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, Korea's household debt in the third quarter grew at its fastest pace since the fourth quarter of 2002, and that's when related records were first compiled. The Bank of Korea says the amount of debt, including sales on credit, stood at around $1 trillion as of the end of the third quarter, up roughly $30 billion from the previous quarter. The central bank, however, adds that the record growth came from an increase in spending as sales on credit, including credit card bills, shot up by more than $3 billion, while the growth of household loans actually slowed in the July to September period from the quarter before. The growth of mortgage loans also slowed in the third quarter, but rose by roughly $17 billion. Hyundai Motor has logged a record number of first-day pre-orders for its new Genesis luxury sedan. Korea's leading automaker says it has already received over 4,300 orders for the vehicle, the highest number of first-day pre-orders for any Genesis model. The figure for the 2009 Ecuse was just under 1,200, and it was over 3,300 for the 2013 DH Genesis. This latest model, which is shrouded in secrecy, the EQ900, or the E90, as it will be known internationally, will officially go on sale in Korea starting December 9th. It will be the first model sold under the new Genesis brand name, which was spun off from Hyundai earlier this month to be positioned as its own standalone luxury car brand. Global sales for the E90 will start next year. Korean cosmetics are a pillar of the country's exports to China and elsewhere in Asia. But these days, local companies seeking to broaden their business are taking their products to less traditional markets outside the region. Our Kim Ji-yeon tells us where.
Korean cosmetics giants are increasingly turning to the Middle East and South America for growth. Amore Pacific is planning to enter Brazil and Colombia by 2017, even as it plans to expand its footprint in Dubai and the Middle East next year. LG Household and Healthcare, which owns the Face Shop, hopes to open stores in Kuwait and Bahrain after logging sales of $4 million last year via its shops in 4 Middle Eastern countries, including Jordan and the UAE. This trend has been driven by a rise in cosmetics exports to these regions in recent years. Data by the Korea Customs Service show the country's cosmetics exports to Peru have jumped to $233,000 this year from mere $54,000 in 2011, while exports to Colombia have climbed to $459,000 so far this year from $319,000 in 2011. The agency attributes the jump to the rising popularity of Korean cultural content and an increasing demand for cosmetics in both regions, even though the cosmetics industry is still relatively undeveloped in both places. In the past 3 years alone, the total volume of Korean cosmetics exports has shot up more than 124%, amounting to nearly $18 trillion last year. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Korea is considering revamping its reunification curriculum for preschool-aged children next year. Seoul's Unification Ministry said on Tuesday that it will distribute the resources to preschool teachers in the first half of next year. Reunification is already part of the preschool curriculum, but critics have said the current materials are insufficient. The Unification Ministry says the new materials could take the form of PowerPoint presentations or animated cartoons. Now, before we go, let's take a brief look at the weather, because Seoul could see its first snow of the season this week, and one place that will definitely see snow, and today, is Korea's northeastern Gangwon-do province. The nation's weather agency has just issued a snow advisory for that region. It forecasts up to 50 centimeters will fall through Wednesday night. Up to 3 centimetres is expected in northern Gyeonggi-do province on Wednesday morning, but there's only really a slim chance that it will snow in Seoul, and if it doesn't snow, it's going to rain instead. The mercury is going to plunge as well over the next couple of days. We're going to see a low of 0 degrees Celsius in Seoul on Thursday and -4 on Friday, so make sure you wrap up nice and warm if you're watching us in Korea. With that, let's take a look at the weather around the world. Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broome. Thank you as always for tuning in, and we'll be back throughout the day with more newscasts. Goodbye.